Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of ScanForce's continuing education series of webinars. My name is Brian Berry. I'll be your master of ceremonies for today. And today we are specifically going to be talking about some new additions to the production management family of offerings here at ScanForce. So the order of ceremonies here, I'm going to, of course, record this. We will be distributing this out to you. If you registered, you will get a copy of the recording. And we certainly encourage you to ask any questions along the way in the chat that you may come up on. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. By way of agenda, I'm going to give a very brief overview because I know a great many of you already know who we are. We're a known entity. You're familiar with us as an organization and what we do. But I understand that because of the nature of this webinar and the topics we're going to be talking about, there may be some individuals out there in the Sage 100 world that are not familiar with ScanForce. So I'll give you a very brief overview. I promise I won't try to bore you too much. Then we're going to jump right into looking at the new enhancements. There are 5 of them. You'll see them listed here. So if at any point in time, if you wanted to come back and view the recording, and if you know that punch clock is the thing that you're interested in, well, you can go right to the 4th topic of conversation there. Okay. All right, so let's jump into a quick overview of our organization. And I always say at the beginning of these presentations that I promise you I will not read the slides to you. We all went to kindergarten. We can all handle that. So just in brief, we've been around for a long time, over 20 years. We grew out of the Sage 100 world. It was a 100 client, just like you, that said, hey, I want to scan barcodes way back when. Something was written for them. It grew organically. And now here we are, all these years later. We have over 10,000 users across multiple Sage platforms today. Okay. In terms of what we do, let's break that down into 4 components. WMS, or Warehouse Management System. This is the classic barcoded inventory control system that you think of. Well, that's what most people will relate to when they hear the name ScanForce. They think barcoding. And that's okay because we are at our core a barcoding company. And warehouse management system just means receiving and picking and shipping and physical count and things of that nature, all the normal distribution things that happen in any given warehouse. We actually have 3 different versions of that. We call them Core, Select, and Premier, and they have different function levels, feature sets. And my main job when we get on the phone for the very first time is to listen to you talk about your operations, what are your hopes and dreams for your warehouse, and help you figure out which one of these 3 makes the most sense for you in your world. Okay? And once we do that, we'll talk about labeling. Like I said, we're a barcoding company. Barcodes drive everything that we do. So, of course, label printing is built into our system. I started to say core, but that would confuse you with the core version of our WMS. It's actually built into all 3. So if you're one of the lucky ones where everything comes in your door pre-labeled, congratulations. Everybody else, the rest of the 99% of us, we have to add barcode labels at various points in the process, and we can certainly handle that very seamlessly. Okay. We also have another product called mobile sales that is separate from warehouse management. And this is for those of you that have a will call counter and you want to be able to take orders detached from a PC as you move around the facility. Or maybe you go to a trade show and you want to take quotes and orders there. Or you have route sales or outside salespeople that go and visit with customers and you want them to have more of a tablet type device and be able to take orders and have those flow directly back into Sage. It's exactly what mobile sales does. So just whet your appetite there a little bit. We're not going to talk about that today since we're talking specifically about manufacturing. So in our manufacturing suite, we have multiple components that tie into the various manufacturing products that Sage 100 offers. Production management being the key one that we're going to discuss today. Now, everything that we talk about today is an enhancement to production management. So none of these are standalone per se. They would require that you are using production management in Sage as your manufacturing module, and it would require the use of our product, the ScanForce Production Management Automation, which are the screens on the handheld that allow us to issue materials and do completions and track labor and print barcodes for finished goods and all that good stuff, okay? So everything that we'll talk about today are enhancements on top of the existing production management structure. Okay. Now, one enhancement that's been around for a long time that some of you may be familiar with is make to order, or MTO for short. Now, I know that some customers you make to stock. You produce stuff, you put it on the shelf, and you wait for a sales order and you pick it and ship it. We absolutely handle that, always have. Okay. But for those of you that are true make to order, you get a sales order. That's when you recognize the need to make something, and then it ships directly out against that sales order. Well, make to order was made for you. What it does is it essentially watches you enter sales orders. And if you enter a sales order for something that needs to be produced, we'll automatically create the production management work ticket. That's the name of the document, the work ticket, or the name of the transaction in Sage, to create that product in the warehouse. So we basically remove one step from the process every single time. Now, if your organization does a little bit of both, you make some stock, you make some to order, okay, we can still work with make to order, this make to order enhancement. We allow the user to determine whether this is something that we want to make or not, rather than being fully automated. So there's a couple of layers there, but this was the first enhancement to our production management automation product. So I wanted to mention that to you before we get into the other ones, because make to order will actually filter into one later on today. Now, of course, we do bill of materials as well, which is another production mechanism within Sage 100. And we even still support the old legacy work order product that Sage has been trying to move everyone to production management for many, many years. So hopefully, maybe if you haven't yet made that move from work order to production management, some of the things today may entice you. Okay, so let's jump right into it. The very first one of these enhancements that we're going to dive into today is actually the largest and the most complex. So rather than bearing the lead, I thought that would bring that up first. We call it work ticket material management. In short, what this does is it allows you to create essentially what amounts to a reservation for specific material that are components that will be used on a work ticket. It's really never been done before, so we're breaking new ground here. Okay, so before we get into what it does, let's talk about historically what it couldn't do that led us here. Okay, so production management out of the box doesn't allow you to pre-allocate or reserve specific lots or serials to a work ticket. It's just never something that was added to the product. So if it didn't exist in Sage, well, when we created our multi-bin, which if you're not familiar, this is an overlay on top of Sage Inventory that allows you to see the same product in more than one place and do a lot of cool things with it. So because this didn't exist in Sage, we never made that part of our multi-bin solution either, because it just wasn't a thing. All right. So because of that, if we didn't know the specific place that this specific item lived in your warehouse, we couldn't direct your picker to go get it there. It just wasn't a feature that was available. So we couldn't do what we call directed picking, which is, hey, I know exactly what I want. I know exactly where it is. I'm going to tell the picker via a handheld to go to that spot, get that exact thing. Just couldn't do it. So the next logical step is a two-step process where you might have a picker go get something and then bring it to the production area and then have someone else double check it to make sure that it's the right thing before you put it into play. Because we all know if you pull the wrong part, you could damage the machinery or you could ruin an entire batch of production. So sometimes that second checking step is crucially important to the operation. These are just things that we just never could do because it wasn't something that existed in Sage. So now what we're doing is we are adding this functionality within our multi-bin. Now, of course, this predicates that you must utilize our multi-bin version in order to make all of this work. Okay, that's sort of the backbone where all this exists. And you must also have Production Management Sage and ScanForce's Production Management Automation, which are the screens on the handheld that tie into PM back in Sage. So those are sort of the requirements that you must have to make this application work. But if you're interested in this application, you probably already have at least two of the three. Okay. All right. So it's going to make it a lot more flexible. And let me explain why. First of all, when you make this allocation, and when you hear the term allocation, think reservation. I'm reserving it. It can be done a couple of different ways. The first is manual. Okay. Now, I personally came out of the metals industry. So I worked for companies that had big warehouses full of metal. Metal is made in batches that we termed heat numbers, but in Sage, we would call that a lot. And they have different chemical and physical properties. And if I was making something for someone, it could be an aerospace application that's very crucial. There are specific chemical and physical properties about these components that we may find advantageous. So we may want this particular piece of metal to go into this process to make that part for that company. So I might manually want to allocate and reserve that lot number or potentially a serial number and reserve that or allocate it for this particular manufacturing process. Okay, that's one mechanism. You can manually go in there and say, I want that one for whatever reason makes sense in your world. Okay, the other option, which is probably going to be more prevalent for most users, is to auto allocate based on business rules. And the timing of when we do this automatic allocation exists at these three levels. When we create the work ticket, you can create that reservation or allocation instantly right then and there. Or when we release the work ticket, because you could create a work ticket and it's on hold, and then we choose to release it when we're ready to do it. So you can control the timing either when it's made, first originally created, or when we release it. The other option is when we actually print a pick sheet. So that print process can kick off the allocation. So the point here is if I enter 2 work tickets today, one is going to be run today, another one I know isn't going to happen for 2 weeks. Well, if the components that are going into those might potentially expire, if the one that's going to be done 2 weeks from now, if it's allocated first, well, those products might expire before I ever get to use them. So I want to change the timing of when I make the allocation to make it more appropriate for my environment. So we offer you this level of flexibility, and there are many others that we'll get to in a moment. Now, so these are some of the things that happen sort of in the setup mode, okay, or procedurally. Let's talk about what happens on the scanner. So if you're holding a handheld scanner in the warehouse, what are you going to be able to do that's different? First of all, for any of you that are familiar with ScanForce and with our multi-bin, then you know that we have a one-step process for sales orders, and we have a 2-step process for sales orders. This work ticket production management function that I'm going to be describing is virtually identical. We are extending that same functionality that you know and love over here to the manufacturing side. Okay, so the typical one-step process would be the system, based on whatever business rules you choose, it reserves a specific lot or serial in a specific bin. Okay, now we know the unique product and we know the unique location where that is. So on the handheld, we can communicate that to the user to make their life very simple. They don't have to wander around looking for a lot number. It says go to location A1A, they walk there, and the product is right there where it's supposed to be. Okay, this is one of the huge benefits of using barcoding in a multi-bin environment, is the efficiency of getting information to your users. Okay, we also are going to validate that information. So when you scan a barcode, we're going to make sure that you're getting the right item code, the right lot number or serial numbers, and take it for the right place. This way we keep Sage inventory completely accurate. Okay, that's a term that may sound foreign when you hear me say it, but it's true. It can happen with barcoding. Sage inventory can be completely accurate. So that's the one-step process. We just tell you where to go, you go get it, and you move it over to the production area, all in one step. Or we can do it in 2 steps. So I'm a picker. I may go and validate the right item, right lot, right quantity, right location, all on the handheld, and then I move it to a staging area over in the production area, and then another person comes behind me and double checks my work. All right. Here's a classic example, because sometimes I say this kind of thing and people will say, but Brian, if we scanned a barcode, we know it's the right thing, right? Well, yes, but imagine this scenario. I walk up to the shelf and I scan the barcode, it goes beep and it says, yes, Brian, you're awesome, you picked the right thing. This is the right item, it's the right lot, right quantity, everything. But somebody behind me says, hey, Brian, and I turn around and I talk to them for 5 minutes. Now, I've already scanned the right one. I got feedback from ScanForce that says, Brian, you did it perfectly. You did your job awesome. You got the right thing. But when I turn back around after talking to that person, I physically pick up the one next to it, and it's the wrong lot, or maybe the wrong item altogether. Sometimes in your world, you probably know better than I do, stuff looks a lot alike. Okay, left bracket, right bracket. They're exact opposites of one another, but they look pretty much the same. So I told the system I was picking the right one, but I physically grabbed the wrong one. Now I go and I move it over to the production area. What's going to happen if we actually run that through? It's going to mess up the whole production run, or maybe even damage the machine. Okay, so this two-step process, even though we used barcodes to begin with, we get to use them a second time, get a double check, a second set of eyes to make sure it's correct before it actually goes into that production run. Okay. Now, another cool thing, I told you this was flexible, right? Another cool thing here is even if you don't want to do those pre-allocations that we talked about and reserve specific, now we can give you this two-step process for getting material and staging it and then double checking that it's correct. So even if you're not doing the pre-allocation part, this component of picking, staging, and double checking will still be available to you. And some of you will, that's enough. You say, that's enough. I've seen it. I want it. That's exactly what we want to do. I don't care about the pre-allocation part. That's okay. It's all one thing, but we can turn off and on different components to make it more flexible for you. Okay. Now let's talk about what this really does for you. What are some of the advantages? Well, obviously I get to reserve inventory. Okay. That's really that's one of the main goals for a lot of you that you've always wanted, but never could do. And I've wondered this myself. I'm like, we can do this on sales orders. We can reserve this stuff on sales orders. We can automate all this stuff. Why can't we do it on work tickets? Well, here we are. It exists now. Okay. So you can reserve a specific lot. The auto allocation rules, there are multiples. Here's some examples. I mentioned expiration date a moment ago. Obviously, if you work in a world where things expire, that expiration date is crucial to your business. How much money have you wasted on stuff that sits on the shelf and past its expiration date and you have to throw it out? Imagine if the system would automate and make sure that you were using the stuff that's going to expire first so that that just doesn't happen. I'm willing to make a bet that the amount of money that you've already thrown out is a lot more than what this enhancement costs. Okay, so this is a no-brainer for you if you're dealing with expiration dates. Or maybe it's just bin location. Maybe it's just a matter of convenience. It's here instead of there. I'm going to go get it because it's closer to me. Okay, we can also do this on dates like inbound dates and things of that nature. The point is we have multiple rules. This sort of filters into that flexibility conversation that we've been having all along the way. Okay, and you can pick and stage. That's really a big deal. Okay, so picking and staging, instead of just saying, yeah, I found the stuff I'm supposed to use. Okay, great. Where did you put it? Where is it? Who's got it? How am I going to go find it? But in multi-bin, we can pick it and then we can stage it. And the place that we stage it could be a generic location like components for production, just a generic bucket where we put stuff over in the manufacturing area. Or it could be very specific. We can get really granular. If you have 5 production lines, I can say, I'm going to pick this stuff and I'm going to move it to line number 2 because that's where we're going to run this. And it's right there. Or if you name your machines, I can say I'm moving it to machine number 5. So you can get as granular and specific with this, or you can be very generic and just say, I moved it over to the production area. And we can create a bin called production or components for production or whatever term makes sense for you. Okay. All right. Now, obviously to make this work sounds pretty complex, even though I'm trying very hard to simplify the theory here. But you can imagine there's a decent amount of setup that goes behind the scenes because I've said, well, you can do it this way or you can do it that way. You can use all the features or you can only use part of the features. So there is some setup that happens behind the scenes, and I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds here, but I did want to point out a few things. And one of them is that timing mechanism of when we create this reservation or allocation. You can see this drop down here. First of all, I've noted that we are auto allocating by checkbox, but I have this drop down that says, should I do it based on the date the work ticket was created? Or maybe the date that production's going to start? Or maybe the date production's going to be due and finished? So in your world, there is a great deal of uniqueness, and we have tried to build in some facilities that allow you to just via a Dropbox customize it specifically for your needs without having to spend a bunch of money to really customize it through coding. Okay, that's something that we always try to do. Now, when we actually create this, we can print a pick sheet. Now, you don't have to. Some people want to go paperless, and that's okay. But I want to show you what this pick sheet could look like. You can see on the left-hand side highlighted, I've got the locations. It ran through the auto allocations. And the activity here, I'm installing memory chips. So I need this motherboard here, and I need this chip, whatever the heck this thing is, okay? And I need 2 of each of them. So it's telling me exactly where to go. It's created a reservation, or again, the term we use is allocation, at this location for this product and 2 of them. Now, the chips themselves are a little more unique. They are lotted. The motherboards, maybe they're more generic and they're not, but the chips have a specific lot number or batch number. And so we're specifically telling them to go get to this lot number. Now, that may seem daunting, okay? How are they going to distinguish this lot from that lot, or this serial from that serial? Well, again, barcodes. So what we can do is use 2-dimensional barcodes like a QR code, and we can encode the item code, the lot number, maybe an expiration date, any information that you want. We can encode it all in that one barcode. Some of you that have been with me on multiple of these calls have heard me say, I can encode the entire Gettysburg Address the size of a postage stamp. That's how dense these symbologies or languages of the barcodes are. If your head's spinning about barcodes, that's okay. We're the barcode experts. Come talk to us and we'll fill you on all the gory details. So the point is, with one barcode scan, I can identify the item, the lot number, all that at one time. Then we'll populate the various parts of our handheld application as needed, okay? And again, like I said before, you don't have to print the pick ticket, that pick sheet. We can do this all on the handheld digitally and go completely paperless if you want. This is what it's going to look like. So here's a screen, just a manufacturing menu, and I can go into either material issue, which would be that one-step process where I just go pick stuff and I move it to the production area, or I can do the 2-step process, which is picking and checking. And again, flashback to those of you that are familiar with our sales order side, it's exactly the same, isn't it? We have a 1-step process and we have a 2-step process in sales order picking and packing. Same exact concept here, okay? So if I select material picking, see up here at the top says material picking, I'm gonna get a list. Here's my motherboard, and here's my chips. I need 2 of each of them. And just like we saw on that pick sheet a moment ago, it's telling me exactly where they exist. Aisle A, 260, A, 260. That's the bin or the shelf or the location where this item exists. And the second one is down here on aisle D, 210. So once I scan the item, it confirms that it's the right thing. Now it wants me to scan the location. So we typically would put a barcode on the shelf, okay, and scan it. So that way we know we're getting the right item and we're taking it from the right place. This is how we keep Sage accurate, okay? And we talked about that in the beginning, about what are the mechanisms we can do to keep Sage inventory accurate. Identify the item, identify the place, and finally identify the lot number and quantity. Okay. The reason we have the quantity here is because you may have multiple lots that go into this run. So I may get 1 from one lot and 1 from another that make up the total 2 that I need. Okay. That may have come from different lots. So we account for that here. All right. Now, once we collect all this data, if we went into work ticket entry and looked, if we go down to the tier distribution level here, we would see a screen that looks like this that says, hey, look, we've moved it to that components for production, that bucket sort of bin over in the manufacturing area. And we've specified this lot number and this quantity. That reservation is still there. It's still being held. We've just moved it from where it was stored before over on aisle D, and now we've moved it over to this component prod bin, which again is just a generic bucket over in the manufacturing area where we're now staging this before it is consumed. Okay. All right, so that was step 1 of the process. Step 2 would be the checking. We did picking first, now we're going to do checking, and I would get a screen that looks exactly like the first one, except I don't need the location anymore because we've already staged it. Okay, so I don't need, before we needed to know where to go pick it, because if you had 20 items, they may live on 20 different shelves. But now they've been brought together, they're very condensed, they're in that location. We don't need to identify that here. So we're just going to scan the item and then identify the lot and quantity. And again, if we have that 2-dimensional barcode that I mentioned a moment ago, once we scan it once, it's going to populate the item field and the lot number field for me automatically. So I don't have to do 2 pieces of data entry. So again, we're trying to build in as many efficiencies as we can. And then once we hit send, we can go into work ticket transaction entry. We see our 2 items here. Okay, 2 are required, 2 were issued. If we drill down into the tier distribution, so we can see the items and what was allotted for this work ticket. Okay, now I know I threw a lot of information at you in like 25 minutes there. Okay, like I said in the onset, this is the more complex of these 5 new enhancements that we have. I fully expect you to have questions. I fully expect you to ask me 10 what if questions and how it's going to work in your world. That's why I'm here. That's why I have a job. I'm your liaison to anything ScanForce 100. So at the very end of my presentation, there'll be a slide with contact info. You send an email, you make a phone call, I will get on the phone with you one-on-one, and we'll talk about your use case. I want to hear exactly how you do it in your warehouse, so then I can show you all of these flexibility things, all these configuration things that we can do behind the scenes to make it work specifically for you in your environment exactly the way that you always hoped and dreamed. Okay? All right, let's move on now and look at the second of our topics for today. I promise the other ones won't take 25 minutes each. Okay, I promise. These are a little bit more simple. This one is called Production Management, or PM, Labor Dilution. All right. Now, basically what we're doing here for you is simplifying the process whenever you have one individual that's doing more than one thing at a time. So if, in production management, you can track labor. So if you clock in on one job, then you clock in on a second job, how do we divvy that up? Imagine this scenario. I'm running a CNC machine, okay? Actually, I'm running 3 of them. And I'm going to start one, and then I'm going to start the second, well, then I'm going to start the third one. They're all running simultaneously. I'm just looking through the glass window at the thing working in there. And at the end of an hour, all 3 are done, and I clock out of all 3 jobs. Well, on the clock, I worked for 1 hour, but I tracked an hour's worth of labor on the first work ticket, and an hour on the second one, and guess what, an hour on the third one too. So I'm the model employee. I did 3 hours worth of work and 1 hour on the clock. Well, that's an accounting nightmare for you, okay? And it's something that you may well be aware of. It's something that's been a limitation all along. So now we have this labor dilution. And what labor dilution will really do for you is this. It's going to spread the time automatically. Okay, so if you have overlapping time, let's say I have an hour of overlapping time, what it's going to do on 2 work tickets is allot 30 minutes to each of them. All right, so this is very simple, very straightforward. Don't overthink it. It does exactly what it sounds like. It's going to divide the time. Okay, and let me show you an example of that. Okay, so if I clock into my first work ticket at 10 a.m. and an hour later, I clock into my second work ticket B. So now I'm working on both of them simultaneously. Okay, then an hour later, I clock out of the first work ticket. An hour later, I clock out of the second work ticket. So I worked from 10 to 1, total of 3 hours. Now, if you look down below, you'll see how we allocated this. The exclusive time, okay, from 10 to 11, I worked for 1 hour on A, and from 12 to 1, I worked just on B. But from 11 to 12, I had a share of 1 hour between the 2. So we simply split that time, half and half, 50-50. Each we get 30 minutes. So I'm allotting an hour and a half of time to each of those work tickets. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions about all the what ifs, okay? This is what it does right out of the box. It's simply going to share the collective universal time when they were together. Now, another thing to consider, this isn't just for individuals. We allow you to create crews, so groups of people. So if you have more than one person working on a project or a task or a work ticket or a step in a work ticket or whatever, they could clock in as a crew, not just as an individual. So we can dilute the times of crews and or individuals. So there's some complexities here behind the scenes. The point is, we're just trying to make your life that much simpler, I should say. Now, if you have this turned on, someone might mistakenly forget to clock out of one thing and clock into another, and they don't mean to. Well, we're going to give you a pop-up, okay? So it's telling me this employee is currently logged into this other ticket. Do you want to proceed? So they might say, whoops, oh shoot, I got to jump out of here and go clock out of that other one first. I forgot to do that. Okay, so we're always going to give you this warning message just to make sure they don't accidentally dilute time that's not supposed to. Okay, now some advantages, some things to do here. You don't have to manually update this. All right, now all of our labor goes to our management console, which is essentially, call it our dashboard, if you will. And there's a labor tab there. So we're going to put all these transactions out there, and you can see them. You can sort by work ticket number and see them all together. And you can certainly make manual manipulations. This is the way it has always worked. What we're really trying to accomplish here is just to make your life a little easier. And if it is just as simple as, if we have overlapping time, dilute it 50-50, then awesome. It's just going to be there, and you can hit the button and submit it and not have to go in there and monkey around with it every single time like you may be doing today. Okay, so the labor tracking, the reporting, it's all better, and hopefully we're optimizing things. So that example where I had 3 hours worth of labor and 1 hour on the clock, that kind of thing doesn't happen anymore. All right, that's really what we're trying to do. All right, let's move on and talk about another enhancement that we have called punch clock. So we're still talking about time here. Sage has this punch clock function, so now we're extending this to the handheld. This one really is very simple. What we're doing is just allowing you to clock in time without being tied to a specific work ticket. Heretofore, every time you did a labor transaction in ScanForce, it was specific to a work ticket. Now, with punch clock being added, that doesn't have to happen. You don't have to be tied to a work ticket. A great example here might be if a supervisor, if you want to track their overall time on the floor, if they're just walking around checking on things, it's not specific to any one job or work ticket, but you can still track their time on the floor altogether, and it's going to flow through the labor tracking tab on our management console, just like all the other labor, and then get submitted back to Sage. So that's that supervisor who's overseeing things, okay? So it just makes your accounting for time that much easier, all right? And this is the way it works. It's really very simple. From the manufacturing menu, we're going to give you an option called punch clock. We also have time clock, but remember, time clock specific to a work ticket, all right? So that's your clocking time against a specific production management work ticket transaction. With punch clock, it is just time. And you're going to identify who you are, date and time are grayed out. You just hit the big green button to punch in. You go around, you do your thing, okay? At the end of your thing, you go back into punch clock, and you're going to get a big red button to punch out. It's just as simple as it sounds. It's time, but it's not associated with a work ticket. That's really the only difference than the stuff that we've done, all along, all this time, okay? All right, simple as punch clock is, let's move on, and let's talk about another enhancement called production management step status update, okay? So, work tickets can have statuses. They can be on hold, or they can be in process, or they can be completed, so you create your own. So there's all these different status updates. What we're trying to do with this enhancement is make it very simple for the workers on the floor to update that status. That's typically done in Sage. Well, now we're going to extend that functionality out to the shop floor. That's our life. That's what we do here at ScanForce, is we extend functions out to the shop floor to make it much more efficient to collect data and then feed that back into Sage. Okay? So again, users will be able to update that status on the work ticket right from their gun, from their handheld, okay? It says that there's a global option available. We can talk about that as well. Basically, like for instance, if the only status update that you expect them to ever do is to say that it's completed, then we can go ahead and lock that in. So when they go do the status update, it's locked in, it's defaulted to completion. They just hit the button, and it's very simple, it's very fast, very streamlined, and hopefully can't screw it up. That's really the goal there, okay? So you can make it open-ended where they can select the status, or you can put in a global default, all right? So the obvious advantage here is it allows us to do this in real time on the shop floor. The person who's actually done something and changed the status of this production thing, let them be the one to tell us. Don't go and tell somebody else, or get on a radio and call somebody that's at a PC and force them to do it. Let's just let them do it, okay? So here's what that's going to look like. back to our manufacturing menu, we're going to have a function called work ticket step status update. When you click on that, you're going to identify your work ticket and the step number. So in this case, I'm doing like step 50. Okay, I'm installing a CPU, back to that motherboard example that we looked at earlier. Okay, and now I'm going to get a drop down for status. Is it completed? Is it on hold? So whatever statuses you have out there, again, you can allow them to select, or it can just default to completed, that global setting, and they can just hit accept down there at the bottom, and it's very fast and very easy. Okay, so this one really is pretty simple. All right, let's move on and talk about another enhancement. This one is completions by sales order. So imagine you have one sales order that has multiple work tickets associated with it. Today, you've got to do each one of those individually. Well, since they're all going out the door at the same time on the same sales order, based on your unique process, you may be able to do the completions all at one time as you're packaging up that sales order and getting ready to go out the door, instead of having to go into each individual one of them time after time after time. Just do it collectively. Now, obviously, if you have a very complex environment, this may not work for you, and that's okay. But if it's more of like a kitting type operation, it's really very simple. So what's going to happen is you're going to be prompted for, first of all, the warehouse you're working in and the bin location where the finished items are going to go, because this works in a multi-bin environment. So where are we doing this? If you're going to stage it somewhere, you can have a staging location. If it's shipping out immediately, maybe we go ahead and put it staged at the shipping dock or door number 3 or bay 2 or whatever nomenclature you use. Okay, it's going to prompt you for the sales order. Obviously, we need to know that. Okay, now, if you recall way back in the very beginning when I was talking, I mentioned an enhancement called make to order. Okay, and I said what make to order does is it watches you enter sales orders, and if you need to make something, it can create the work ticket for you. If you do that, it automatically links the work ticket back to its parent sales order. And if you have 3 things or 10 things that are work tickets, individual work tickets that are linked to that sales order, they're all linked to that sales order, and they just have like a -01, 02, 03 type designation. Okay, so if you choose to use our make to order, it can greatly speed up, again, creating efficiencies of linking all these work ticket transactions together. Now, you don't have to. You could do this linkage manually in Sage if you wanted to, but our make to order functionality will do this for you. Again, we're all about creating efficiencies. Okay, so after you identify the sales number, it's going to do a live lookup. It's going to go find any work ticket that's linked to that sales order. Okay, so it loads them all up, and I'm going to show you this on the screen in just a second. And whatever the remaining quantity is, that's what it's going to do. Okay, now obviously this will not work for lots and serials because we need uniqueness there. Those have to be done individually because those are very unique things. So this is for non-lotted and serialized items. This is perfect for those of you that are back flushing. Okay, if you don't really care about the uniqueness of the components that are going in, this is a no-brainer. It's perfect for you. It's going to add one extra level of more efficiency. But it can be done even if you do want to go and scan individual components. It's just going to ask you to do that extra step. Okay. It also will give you the ability to review them, or it can just go. Okay. So if you want to, review them, fine. If not, it can just go. All right. So the obvious advantage is time. I don't have to go into each individual work ticket. I could just do one thing, and ScanForce is going to interact with multiple work tickets simultaneously, saving you a great deal of time. All right. So this is how that's going to look. First of all, if we look at a sales order, okay, I've got the sales order up here, number 27, and I've got 3 items here that have to be made. So I used make to order to create this, and so I have 3 linked work tickets. Okay, the work tickets are the sales order number 001, 2, and 3. So these work tickets by default out of the box are automatically linked back to my sales order. Again, you can make that linkage manually if you want later, but our make to order will do it for you. Okay. So I would go into completion by sales order. Okay, instead of regular completions, which is just, kind of one at the time, do completion by sales order. And once I identify the sales order, it does that live lookup that I mentioned, and it brings forward all three things. See, I've got 10 of these, 5 of these, 2 of these. That matches up to my quantities over here. Okay, now if I need to do by component here, I can drill down inside of one of these and identify all the raw material components that went into it. Or if I'm back flushing, I don't really have to do that. Okay, so what's going to happen here is, excuse me, it's going to automatically, this is work ticket transaction entry over here. You can see my work ticket numbers. I have 3 of them. Here's my item descriptions, and there's the quantities that get fed back into Sage. Okay, so again, we're just automating the collection of this data for you all at one time instead of having to go into 3 unique work ticket transactions. I fully understand this is going to work for all of you. Okay, lot numbers, serial numbers, some uniqueness about if you're adding items, or if there's any uniqueness to any one thing that you do. This is a very generic tool. But for those of you that are doing a lot of like kitting type applications, things like that are very generic and the recipe never changes, this will be a fantastic tool for you to use. Okay. All right. So that is a quick overview of all 5 of our new enhancements. And you can see there, I've popped up the splash screen that has all of our contact information. Again, I fully expect that you will have questions. How is that piece going to work in my environment? Can I do this? Can I do that? Okay, so I fully expect that that's going to come up. Please call that number, ask for Brian. Be happy to help. Okay, that info email address, that comes to me and multiple other people on my sales team. So if you send it to info, I promise you'll get a response back from us. So if I'm traveling, somebody else will get back to you, I promise. We're trying to be very diligent about that. Okay, now I assume that we have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to jump over and take a look at some of those with the few minutes that we have remaining. Can you customize labor dilution? Actually, yes. So this was something that I thought was very forward thinking from our development team. Labor dilution is not something that you turn on with just a checkbox. Remember, this is where if you're doing 2 work tickets simultaneously and we can dilute or divide the labor evenly between them during shared times. So when they created this, it's not just a checkbox that turns on labor dilution and it works like it works and it is what it is. It's actually turned on via drop down. So if you want to do it this way, you select this option. Another way, select that option. This is one of those where we knew you were going to have uniqueness. And each one of you out there in the Sage 100 world, we're going to say, that's cool, but can it do this? Or this is the way we do it in our operation. We want to hear those conversations. We are very willing and ready and able to handle those. We have our own internal development team. We write 100% of our own code. So if you have a unique situation, absolutely, please bring that to me. I want to take this to our team because you help us flesh this out. Okay, it exists the way it exists today because we have multiple customers that ask for it, and that's how they wanted it. So that's why we made it. But we want you to bring your uniqueness to the table so we can add that to the collective benefit. Okay. All right. Another question. This one is about work ticket status updates. Says, can you default? Yeah, so I think I mentioned that. If I didn't, I apologize. So you can set a global default, like completed. If that's the only thing you're ever going to do, if that's the only update, you can go ahead and lock that in. So from the gun, you can go ahead and scan that. Okay. Let's see. This one is also about status update. Let's see, it says, is the new status update function the only way to update status on the handheld? Actually, no. That's an interesting question, and I'm glad you asked it. I didn't think to mention that originally. So the way this works is if you are collecting labor and you go through our normal handheld labor collection application, when you're doing time clock entry at the end, you can put a status there. The reason that we created this new enhancement is because not everybody that uses production management wants to capture labor. You don't have to, okay? So we're allowing you to have a standalone option to collect that, that status code for the work ticket, okay, and send that back into Sage, even if you're not using our time clock labor function. All right, hope that makes sense. Okay, so we're about out of time. We do have some more questions, and they look to be pretty specific. So here's what we're going to do. We have your questions. We are saving them. We will respond to each of them in kind, I promise. Okay, and if you didn't have a question that you sent in via the chat, please ping us an email. Send it to that info@ScanForce, or give us a call, and we'll be happy to talk to you. So once again, Brian Barry here from the Sage 100 team at ScanForce, thanking you for joining us for this continuation in our educational webinar series on all of our latest and greatest enhancements for production management. Thanks for joining. Bye, everybody.